all my camera crew here, Cameron and Ann who did lights, and Hart who did camera, and I did the sound. And so if you slow the film up, when that one guy comes over, you can see me with my little headphones, and I go down first, and then they try to break the camera, and they, break the lights, so we'll have to be shooting in the darkness. But they didn't hurt me because I did the sound, and I had a Nagra from here to here with plastic on it, so while they were kicking me, I wasn't really feeling it. And I just took my mic, I had a big shotgun mic, and was swinging it at them.
They were kicking you?
Yeah, kicking me. They pulled me down. I'm the first one to go down. And later on, Houston Elmore, who was one of the organizers, said they had a bounty on my head of $5,000. And I said, well, Houston, why didn't you tell me? And he said, well, we didn't want you to go home. And I said, I wouldn't have gone home. So those were, and then at nights they'd shoot into the miners' houses, and we'd be in mattresses on the bottom, until they went away. Oh, and also, when I first got there, Houston called me in and he said, okay, what gun do you want? And I grew up in Scarsdale, New York. And so I had never even seen a gun, really. And there was a little pink gun. It's a very ladylike gun, and so to make him feel happy, I took it. But later on, as it got worse, I learned how to shoot a .357 Magnum. And I also had a huge rifle, shotgun, that you'd have to leave right on your shoulder or else you'd get bruised by it. So I'm a tough cookie, beware.
I wanted to ask just sort of two questions. One was about building trust, because they really, they let you into a lot of spaces. So I'd like to, if you could talk about building trust. And I can't leave these people behind. What was the community like after the strike? Because this was sort of a brother against brother. There's a lot of stuff that has to be worked out for the community to move forward. And I just wonder if you have anything you can share about the aftermath of the whole thing.
Sure. So the film won an Academy Award, and the first people that I called were the people in Harlan County who had been watching it, and they were screaming all over, we won an Academy Award, we won it. They were so excited to have done it. And so after the screening at the New York Film Festival, and that was fun, the women came, and some of the coal miners, and Hazel Dickens was there with her song, They'll Never Let Us Down, and I Xeroxed, was at Alice Tully Hall, which was 1,200 seats, and I Xeroxed all the songs and put them in the playbills so that people would be able to sing along, and she came as the credits were rolling and sang that. And Lois Scott, the woman who took the gun out of her dress, had been made head of the Black Lung Association. And she started soliciting money at Alice Tully Hall from the audience. And people were throwing $5 and $10 and $20 bills on the stage. And I was in the corner laughing, and she didn't realize she was mic'd. And so she said, Barbara, you stop that laughing and stuff that money in your bra, we need it. So, and the question of trust?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, we got there, and we got out of our cars. I got out of the car early in the morning, and they told us to come back the next morning at 4 a.m., and the road was very slick on Pine Mountain, and there were no guardrails or anything, and our car went over. And we all crawled out of it and walked to the picket line. And from from that moment on, they trusted us. At the beginning, they didn't. They, like the first day, they just were calling themselves, you know, Florence Nightingale and Martha Washington and things like that. But they took us into, you know, their hearts. They fed us. We lived with them, and we're part of the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I absolutely love about documentary films and why it's my favorite genre, love it, is it's story on top of story on top of story. And when I viewed it the first time and when I viewed it the other day, again, in preparation for this, you told the story of each person and each group of people from a different entry point. But one of the stories that I picked up was the story of the machines. So I've been interested why the emphasis in the film about the machinery and what the machinery told in the story of this documentary.
You mean inside the coal mines?
Yes, inside
Yeah.
the coal mines.
We opened with that.
Yes.
And I think what the machinery and what the coal mines told you was that people had to crawl. It was only 42 inches high. The machinery was frightening. It was big, you know, like sword-like things that whizzed around. People ate their lunches there. They took their breaks inside the mine. They inhaled coal dust, which gave many of them black lung. And as they said, they were living in their own grave.
Yeah. Wow. Very powerful.
One thing I really love about this film, and it's been a while since I've seen it, is that it's not a story, and it's not a documentary that is leaning into any phony, triumphal anything about getting the contract. It's just the hard, deadly work of getting this contract that is so much story enough. And it just seems like the one word that came into my mind this time, I guess, is just, you know, vigilance. How much you always have to protect that kind of right, what you have to sacrifice for it. And I just wonder if you did you go in? I mean, I can't imagine you had any, you know, sense of exactly what you'd be risking personally and what these people would be risking personally when you started.
I didn't think about that. I was in my 20s, and sometimes when you're in your 20s, you think you're invincible and you'll just live forever. And for me, it was just one of the most beautiful experiences of my life to have these people take us into their homes, open up to us. You know, we tried to protect them, because we would go when we ran out of film, and it was shot on 16mm film. We'd bring the cameras and get up too, so that hopefully that would keep violence down. It was just an amazing experience. I mean, I didn't know if I ever wanted to go home, because I had met such beautiful people there.
There are some people I know in the audience who had relatives who worked in the coal mines and who had relatives who also died in the coal mines. So I was very mindful of that as I was watching this movie. And I was wondering, you established relationships with the people. Did you keep in touch with any of the people after that? Because you were there for how long?
Well, I was in Harlan County for 13 months, and I was in other parts of the coal areas for about 6-7 months. And yes, they would call all the time. Sudie Cruisenberry, who said, "I'm not after a man, I'm after a contract," passed away, and they had me do the eulogy for her. And now their children and their grandchildren are calling me. So it's been for a long time.
I did want to share with you, my first and and I think we still do, teach a course called English 104, which is Intro to Cinema. And it's sort of a retrospective of genres, and your film is really central to that. And I think one of the things that I have came to appreciate at this moment was documentaries can get lost in the politics of the situation, but I was just moved by this was about people. It wasn't, I mean, we're aware of the politics around it, but at the core, it's about people and people speaking for themselves and that incredible music. And was there ever a temptation to sort of expand it and make it more about sort of that, but the people were always your focus?
Well, there couldn't be nothing stronger for me than the people telling their stories. And if there were politics, it came out through their passion and their truth and their willingness to give up their lives for what they believed in.
Yeah, and it's really honest. If I have criticism of documentary film, it can be too much about the politics and not enough about the people. And I just really want to praise you for keeping the focus on the people who ultimately have to sort of live and breathe those situations every day. That funeral scene is incredibly impactful, and you just feel the loss of the entire community that has to deal with that young man's death. And then to find out, did that person ever get charged with that crime?
No, Bill Bruner was put into a policeman's uniform and snuck out of the county.
Oh, wow. Wow.
If I thought this might be a good time to transition to the audience. If someone else,
Of course.
is that okay?
Okay, yes. Well, they'll be lining up. We have microphones, and we want you to use the microphone. So the microphone wranglers find the people with their hands up. And while we're doing that, I wanted to ask, what was one of your most difficult days? Well, probably also when you were on the ground, I'm sure. But over the course of 13 months, was there ever a time when you felt like giving up, or did you ever think that there was hope, or how did you feel about the whole thing?
Well, I think the most difficult day, or the scariest day, was the day after we were machine gunned, when everybody had guns and we didn't know, what would happen. And on that day, I was really scared because I could feel all these strange juices of fear in my mouth. And no, I never thought about leaving. I mean, I was there for the long haul, and the only time I ever would come back is, if we had to get more money to keep going. So, and I'd have to write proposals or call and beg people. And all my friends and family, instead of giving me a gift or anything like that, they would give me money to keep going on the film. Yeah.
And how did your experience in Harlan County, USA, inform your filmmaking from there on? Tell us about some of the other things, some of the other films that where you felt you really made a difference, and how Harlan County, USA shaped that.
I don't think I ever really made a difference. I think that it's the people who make a difference, and the stories I was able to capture, whether it was in American Dream, which is another labor film that I did, where unfortunately the people lost the battle, and other films, or Mariel Hemingway, talking about, the suicides and mental health in her family. And I just knew as a person I wanted to continue to tell stories with the brilliant people that I met in my life.
Yeah. Question?
There's a question From the balcony in the center.
Balcony center. Why never balcony left or right? Always balcony center.
That's a great
Okay.
question. Okay, hi. Thank you so much for sharing this work with us, which feels more important now than ever. Something that I love about your documentary is how you foreground the experiences of the women. Coal mining can be this masculine space, and I was just wondering if you could touch on both your position at being a woman filmmaker and also your decision to share their lived experiences and their important roles in the strike.
Yes, I couldn't help but do it. The women were so strong and so positive, and near the beginning of the film, Bessie Lou Cornett talks about, watching her father die of black lung and her grandfather dying of black lung, and she just said, we have to do something. So when I had a chance, there was no way to stop me. And that's how all the women felt, because they had just watched their families go through mine explosions or die of black lung or really horrific things that happened to them in their lives, and they wanted to be part of it and do something.
I have a question today I noticed something that I didn't notice when I first saw the film. Early on, someone said that in Australia, they had actually found a method to help prevent this coal miners from getting black lung disease. And what was that, and what do they do now?
Yeah. Well, there's only 25,000 working coal miners now. And I'm not exactly sure what they did in Australia, whether they, put humidifiers or put things inside the mine, but I'm just guessing.
Question?
Center.
Center? Okay.
Hi. So, my kind of a two-parter. I was wondering if you were aware before going into this of like the attacks that you and your crew would experience kind of throughout, and how would that awareness translate to like a documentary filmmaker who wants to kind of document current pockets of public unrest, like not just in this country, but kind of worldwide. There's a lot going on in different places, but how do you approach that with like your primary mindset going into it, and maybe the reactions that would bring, or maybe even the physical threats that would come with that?
We really didn't think about ourselves at all. I mean, for us, it was just about being there and being able to tell the story. And I think if that's something that you want to do, find out as much as you can about it before, even though all the things that you learn are going to be totally different because it's real life. Take a deep breath, have a lot of perseverance, and go for it, because you'd be telling a very, very important story that nobody would know about if you weren't there.
Question?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm going to do two parts. First, I'm going to ask the question, and then I'll tell you why I'm asking it. I wonder if, and we already talked about the fact that you left politics out, which was excellent. It was very human. But there is the National Labor Relations Board, and my question to you is whether you had any feedback, and also, I believe that Nixon was president first and then Gerald Ford second. And I wondered whether there was any response from Washington, or whether the National Labor Relations Board was helping in any way. And then the reason I'm bringing this up is because President Trump fired Gwen Wilcox, who was the first black woman on the National Labor Relations Board, and a panel of judges said, you can't do that, that's against the law, and Chief Judge Roberts put a stay on it. So the National Labor Relations Board, which has to have 3 board members in order to operate, currently has 2. So back to my question, did Washington help, did the NLRB help?
NLRB, I don't recall helping, but we showed the film in the White House, and it helped very much to change the laws about pneumocomiosis, black lung, and that was very incredible.
Question from the balcony, up right.
Okay.
I saw your film the first time 25 years ago in Film 101 here at University of Illinois. I didn't have the tools to appreciate it at the time. I appreciate that it was here today and you sharing your story, because I think what's incredible about it is it feels very lived in. A lot of documentaries, there's talking heads or there's a distance, but I just think the way you depict the lives of the folks involved in this struggle is really powerful. The question I wanted to ask was, I'm also just amazed at what you accomplished as a young woman making a film in the 70s, and what was that experience like for you? I imagine you were a groundbreaker, and what was it like for women making documentary films in that time period?
It was actually really great because men wanted to do fiction films or commercials or TV, and nobody wanted to do documentaries. So it was much easier. It was plenty of hard work. There was no money. You know, you'd have to like beg for money and go to foundations or go to people who believed in it. Or I had an American Express credit card, and I charged so much on that, and thank goodness they didn't have computers in Harlan County to check it. But it was much easier for women to do it because we're less intimidating. I did a film about Mike Tyson and the rape of Desiree Washington, and I was able to ask any question I wanted of anybody because they figured I didn't know anything about boxing. So it's much easier being a woman and doing documentaries.
Did the Oscar sort of that win, how did that impact like going forward? Because you win it pretty early in your career, and how did that propel you forward, or did it? You know, did it really help change the landscape for you at all?
It meant that people would take me a little bit more seriously, because at the beginning when I was funding, somebody said, "Why would a little girl like you want to do a film like this?" And I said, "Educational, sir," but I was seething inside. But it didn't mean that I got to do all the things that I wanted to do financially.
I have to politicize this just for a second. So this Harlan County U.S.A. really got all these waves of interest through PBS showings. In some cases, no. I mean,
It didn't show on PBS.
Oh, festivals and what else? And released.
No, it got released in theaters.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And that's a fun story too.
Let's hear it.
If you want me to tell it. Okay. So Donald Rugoff, who did a lot of really wonderful films, was interested in it. But he had a terrible disease where he would just fall asleep. And he was at the New York Film Festival, and I guess the clapping woke him up. So he agreed to see me. And so I came in, and I was telling him all of my demands, that I wanted union people to see it for free, and you know, I could show it at film festivals, and I had a whole list of demands. And I skipped a part, because first I told him to get up from his desk, and I sat behind his desk, and I said, Mr. Rugoff, you've made a good film, and I gave my list of demands, and he called me a hussy. and I left, saying, okay, I don't care. And then one of the people that he works with, Henry Rogers, called me and he said, we really want the film, Barbara. Would you please do it? And he'll give you a lot of those demands. And I said, absolutely, I'll do it. So it showed in theaters, showed in film festivals, and showed at theaters all over the country.
Which at the time was remarkable.
Never showed on PBS.
I have a
That was really a stupid point I made then, I think, yeah.
It was.
That was utterly false. Good to be here.
Question, audience?
I have a question down front.
Okay.
I'm from one of the coal miner families that you're talking about. My Hungarian and Czechoslovakian ancestors came into Pennsylvania in the early 1900s and worked in the mills. The man I knew as my grandfather told me about going to work at 10 years of age. And I wanted to pay tribute to you because when he told me about working for 10 hours for 50 cents and filling the things I literally, although it's Pennsylvania, and I've been down to those mines, they've obviously long since closed. But the stories they told, but especially the women. You brought my great aunts. I could see them and all the people, the strength they had. And I lost a great uncle in a mine. He was actually a foreman. He went back in to get people after he had gotten out and didn't make it out. And it's just such a tribute to all of the people over the course. And I want to thank you. And I do have a question. What are you working on now? What do you have going forward?
Well, it's now a trilogy. This will be my third union film. And I'm doing a film on modern day unionism, UPS, the Teamsters, Amazon, the deliveristas. If you know who they are, they're the people who are not from this country mostly, and the fear of deportation. And they're the ones that deliver, your noodle soup in rain and snow, at least in the city and in other areas. And also Starbucks, the baristas. And so we've finished shooting, except for a small amount if real life happens. And we're in editing, so I'm excited.
That's great.
Thank you for keeping the focus on work. He was mentioning those kids. What country do I live in? I mean, when you see,
I don't know.
When you see images of children working for 6.5 cents a day, and it just feels so disjointed from the lives that most of us live. And I think that to do work that keeps work and the value of work and the dignity of work in front of us so that we can see it and appreciate it, I think that is just really important. And I hope that this film circles back and people start looking at it again and going, the power of unions and the collective bargaining and people's ability to negotiate on their own behalf is really important, maybe more so now than it was before.
Yeah, what you say is beautiful, and it's something we all need to work for and help each other and have each other's backs.
Here.
The other thing that I had forgotten about in watching it today is that people were actually murdered, but the union guy, Boyle, actually, the Yablonskys were murdered. And how did they catch Doyle? How did that happen, that they caught the killers?
Well, they caught the killers, and the killers said that the money had come from W.A. Tony Boyle, and that's how they got him. Yeah.
So I think we maybe have time for one more from the floor. There's one right there.
Do you have a microphone there?
There you go.
Okay.
I do. Hi, Barbara and panel. I wanted to ask you specifically about your use of music and sound throughout the film. I think in documentary film, music just hits people differently because it's so personal. Can you talk about your selection, but how you collected the music? And then also, I was really impacted by like the layering of like Foley sound, like you're talking about the machinery, things like that. It's not just the music. I'm interested in like, you often layer the sound of like the workers over music, over the sounds of the environment and then the machinery. Can you talk about how you kind of build up your story through sound design?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the music that we used was from this incredible woman, Hazel Dickens. And she was a coal miner's daughter, and she wrote a lot of the music. And I found her music, and she was playing at the Smithsonian. We were in fine cut of the film, and I hadn't asked permission to use any of it. So I went over to her and I said, "Hi, my name's Barbara, and I've been doing a film on coal miners, and we've used your songs, and I want you to come see the film. You know, it's not finished, and see if you'll give me your permission and tell me what you think about it." And she came, and she loved it, and she said, "You can use all my music for free." And she also wrote the last song of the film, "They'll Never Keep Us Down." David Morris, who had his own band, and he sang songs in it like "Dark as a Dungeon" and "Mannington." And I went to his house to get to know him and ask him, and he went, "Nope, you're an outsider. You don't know anything about this. You don't know anything about the culture. I'm not going to do it." And so I spent a lot of time persuading him, and we became very close friends. And I could call him from the editing room and say, "We need, you know, some kind of underpinning. This is what's happening." And I would send him the footage, and days later, he would write something for me. So I was very lucky. Florence Reese, who was in the film, who wrote the original "Which Side Are You On?" You know, that's a theme through the film. She wrote that originally, and she died soon after that day that she was singing. I did sound on the film, about 99% of it, except maybe not when the men were taking a shower near the end. That was one of the few that I couldn't get in. And we just did that so that you would feel the music and also allow yourself to know that it's real, that it's happening, that this is a story, because coal miners are geographically isolated, and a way in which they communicate is through their music. So that's what we did.
Well, we want to, I think I got the signal that that was the last question. So thank you, because I wanted to ask about the music too. Please help me again thank Barbara Koppel, Harlan County, USA.
Thank you all so much, and thank you. So special.